Slight disclaimer, my audio in the intro and the first 10 minutes is Zoom. Didn't have my recorder working. The rest of the episode is clean. Appreciate you guys. Welcome to the Old Man of the Three with JJ Redick and Tommy Alter, brought to you by 342 Productions. This is episode 170. I'll just call it a midsummer mailbag. Tommy, we mentioned this last week. I'll just say it again. We are taking a hiatus in August for some much needed time. We will have some stuff on YouTube that will be up at some point, I'm sure. Got some compilations cooked up. And we will be re-releasing some of our favorite episodes from this past season on our feeds. So if you want to re-listen to the Dame episode, by all means, have at it. And again, I know I've said this on Old Man of the Three and Old Man of the Three Things. Just want to thank you guys for riding with us and rocking with us all season. It's been a fun one. I'm looking forward to hopefully lowering my handicap in August by the end of the summer. That's the goal. So
it's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing how little there is to talk about in August. Like, talk about making, and we're about to get through. We got a lot of great questions today, so we're going to get through a fun mailbag. But it's at a certain point, there's only so much you can talk about rumors and about things that are just not tangible topics. And so I think it's a great time for everybody to take a little break.
Snooze fest. We're here for a snooze fest.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Yes.
We got a lot of questions to get through. And there's some themes in here. What I think we should start with, because we got a bunch of these Jaylen Brown questions after he signed his supermax extension yesterday. Go through a couple of them real quick. Timmy McDonald from Twitter, Celts Inc. JB long term, which we knew was coming, but is the hefty price considered a bad deal or simply cost of business with the new CBA? Scott Knowles says, how does JB's new deal affect the rest of the league, specifically those players that he's regularly compared to? And does it take more teams out of potentially being able to build a championship contender? Okay, so we can start with those questions. But Tommy, I think I probably speak for both. I wasn't shocked that Jaylen Brown signed a supermax extension, right? He qualified for it. He's all NBA this season. He's a player who's done a lot in his career. We'll get into that in a second. And he's entering his prime. But you weren't shocked at all that he signed for this.
No, I think there are reasons for it, but the amount of time it took, he was eligible for it on July 1st. The fact that it took a month was probably a little surprising. But him getting it is certainly not shocking.
Yeah. No player option, gets the trade kicker. Sometimes it's those stuff, the things on the margin, especially when you're doing an extension and you're not beholden to the madness of the first 24 to 48 hours of free agency. Sometimes when you do the extensions, it's the little stuff that holds up. I was always under the assumption that they would re-sign him for this number. I want to go through this real quick because I saw some comments yesterday. I think in general, anytime someone signs for the biggest contract in history in any sport, right, there's some sticker shock. I think in Jaylen Brown's case, there's probably even more sticker shock because Jaylen Brown is a fantastic player. He's not a top 5 player, right? He's not a top 10 player. So I think for the casual fan, they're just like, oh, that's insane, right? Jaylen Brown's not worth it. Jaylen Brown's not worth more than so-and-so. Can't believe Jaylen Brown signed for that when so-and-so signed for that. So let's just talk about this, because I think so much of contract values specifically in football and basketball and to some baseball, not so much hockey because their union sucks, but everything is just tied to revenue, right? So we have a salary cap in the NBA. All right. It's essentially functions for years as a soft cap with the luxury tax and the exceptions coming up in 2 years, like an apron. It'll essentially function as a hard cap, meaning you can't really go over now. Phoenix Suns said, fuck that. We're going to just go all in and deal with the consequences later. But it's essentially a soft salary cap. Within it, once you have a salary cap, you then have to have a max contract, right? Otherwise, if the salary cap's $100 and you want to go sign LeBron James, You're going to pay him 90, and then you're going to have $10 to fill out your roster. That doesn't really work that way. So for certain players, and I don't think Jaylen Brown's in this category, but for certain players, LeBron James, Steph Curry, those two guys for sure. Michael Jordan, if he were to play in today's NBA, Larry Bird, Dominique Wilkins, like there's certain guys you're like Magic, right? You're just like, if there wasn't a salary cap, these guys are worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the league. That's just the reality, right? Yeah. But there is a cap. And Jaylen Brown, because he qualified with his All-NBA appearance, he's eligible to sign 30%, right? The supermax. And he did. I go back to Mike Conley's agency, right?
Yeah,
he signed the biggest
bring that up.
history. And it's like sticker shock. It's like, well, so much of free agency, so much of these extensions are all about timing and when you sign for it, right? And it's all tied to revenue. So the salary cap, as long as it's rising, contracts keep going up. In a year, potentially this fall with Giannis, I don't know what his supermax looks like if he were to sign his extension, but within a year, somebody will blow this number out of the water. Jason Tatum next summer, he's eligible for more money. This will happen in the NBA and probably in the NFL as long as revenues keep rising. Every year, this is going to happen.
The question I had, so you mentioned the Conley thing. I was going to bring that up. In 2016, his was 151 mil, and that was the highest. The question I have is about this particular deal, and we've talked a ton about this with this team and these guys on the show, is not that Jaylen Brown doesn't deserve this contract and this money, but does it make sense for this particular team? And obviously they had to do it because even if they are going to move him down the road, it's not like they're going to move him right now. So there wasn't another option in July 2023. But it is, I think for the casual fan looking at this thing, I think even when you know the numbers, you find it interesting that the highest paid player in the NBA is not the best player on his own team, which is the nature of the beast, but is still interesting and just kind of a weird thing to think about.
Okay. So yeah, a little bit to unpack there because I want to get into the intention of the supermax in the CBA. But before I do that, I think there's two questions here, right? Does Jaylen Brown deserve to get more money than Jokic or Giannis or Steph or LeBron, right, in salary? The answer to that is no. Did the Celtics have to re-sign him or sign this extension for the supermax? The answer to that is yes. They're trying to win a championship. They are best positioned to not allow Jaylen Brown to go into free agency. So the answer is yes. Both can be true, right? The intention of the supermax, I think if you look at really the two biggest probably free agents over this generation that just went into unrestricted free agency were LeBron James in 2010, Kevin Durant in 2016. In both those cases, they were leaving teams that drafted them. In both those cases, they wanted to hit unrestricted free agency. They did not. There was no mechanism to sign this supermax extension. And so they hit free agency. And what happened? They left Cleveland. They left Golden State. The teams then had to go into, Oklahoma City did it a little differently the next year and qualified for the playoffs, but they had to sort of reset, right? Cleveland, of course, went into a rebuild, ended up getting Kyrie, and LeBron came back. But the point is, they lost them for nothing. So you hear all the time now about pre-agency, right? I think about Kawhi Leonard. I think about Anthony Davis. Those two guys were unwilling to sign these massive extensions. And so a year before they were free agents, they traded them because you can't allow these guys to hit free agency. Then you have the Damian Lillard and the Bradley Beal situation where those guys got their money, right? And we'll deal with potentially being traded later. Got their money. I want to win here, blah, blah, blah. Totally. Maximize your profit. Get that. And I think in some cases, the intention was to keep the Kevin Durants of the world. The intention was to keep the LeBron Jameses of the world, the Nikola Jokic's, the Giannis's, the Steph's, these guys. Keep the homegrown talent, keep the top 5, top 10 players. But because of the mechanism with All NBA and Defensive Player of the Year and all that, MVP, whatever you have, you have guys like Rudy Gobert signing for the Supermax. You have guys like Bradley Beal, Jaylen Brown. These are fantastic players, deserving All NBA guys, deserving All-Stars. I'm not saying that. But they're in a different tier than LeBron James, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic. So in some ways, the intention was to keep a certain type of player, right? The top 5 needle movers. But because of the qualifications, we're now in a situation where Jaylen Brown just signed the largest contract extension in NBA history. So I think the intention of the deal has not panned out to the reality of the way the supermax works. Is that fair?
Hey, I think it's fair. And I guess my follow-up to this, and I wanted to get a little bit, I think a couple wrote this in, but I was going to bring it up regardless about Austin's comments. But with the new Austin Rivers comments, but with the new CBA, we've talked about how hard it's going to be to keep these 3 max guys in general. And I thought one of the sort of didn't get as much attention as the Dame stuff, but one of the interesting things that he brought up was like the NBA middle class and how it's basically like you have these max deals and then all these other guys are now playing on minimums or close to the minimums who would have, had much more substantial deals before sort of things have changed over the last few years. I think on like a macro level, if teams are in this situation where it's like, okay, you have to pay a guy like Jaylen Brown, he's an all NBA player, you have to give him this thing. Isn't that going to result in, guys that might have been operating in the like whatever 8 to 16 mil range? Are they going to start getting squeezed out more because the money isn't there anymore because we're having to sort of keep up with the Joneses when it comes to these max deals?
Yeah, no, the money is going to be there because the money has to be paid out, right? Each team has to pay 90% of the salary cap. That money has to be paid out. And with the slight alteration in the new CBA, instead of having to pay out 90% of salary by the end of the season, they now have to do it by the start of training camp. So that money is going to be paid out in free agency. I think as you saw this summer, I think there's going to be contenders, this has been true for a while, but contenders are going to have less and less opportunities to add generational players in free agency because they're in win now mode, the luxury tax, blah, blah, blah. They're just not going to have cap space. And so I think you're going to see, and you've seen this more and more, 2 things, more and more the non-contenders, Houston Rockets this year, San Antonio Spurs, Indiana Pacers, right? These teams, those are the teams that have space this year. There's like 68 teams with cap space. None of them are contenders, right? And the other part is because of the max extensions and because of the new extension rules too. Like when I was with I'll give you an example. When I was with the Clippers in 2016, that was the summer everybody, went crazy or whatever. And, they presented me with an extension and they were like, we're going to give you this extension. We know you're not going to take it because the rules back then, I could only get a raise above a certain amount, right? So I was making 7 and change. My extension would have been 3 for 27. Essentially, like they knew I wasn't going to take that number. They said, we're going to offer to you. We know you're not going to take it. And I said, thank you. I appreciate it. And then I hit free agency, right? Now I could have renegotiated on that number. I could have, taken caps. There was a bunch of different ways to get to a decent number and sign an extension. So I think you're seeing that more and more, right? Jordan Clarkson just did it. Harrison Barnes just did it. Sabonis just did it. Like free agency for the most part is dead. And so what you're going to see is not the generational players. You're going to see the Jaylen Brunson. Jaylen Brunson was the best free agent last year. You're going to see more and more of that, and more teams that don't have a chance to win in the near term. Those are the teams with cap space. You build through the draft. You pay the rookie salary cap. You hope to bring in some. Look what Houston did this year. Like that's what you're going to see. That's going to be free agency. And look, if I'm Jaylen Brown, if I'm these guys, I always go back to Kawhi. Like, I can't believe Kawhi was in San Antonio. Like, Kawhi was in San Antonio. There's no state tax. If he had signed his extension, he went to play in Toronto where he paid a high tax. Now he's paying in California. Like, it's his choice. I'm not knocking his choice. But certain guys would look at that and be like, oh, I'm going to lose 30 or 40 million net in my pocket, post-tax, net, 30 or 40 million dollars.
You're never getting
guys
back.
Don't want to do that. Guys don't want to do that. So, yeah, I do think free agency is, for the most part, dead. It's unrestricted free agency is dead.
But so to that point, if free agency is dead, it's unavoidable, right? That what's going to happen with Dame and what's happened with these other guys over the last couple of years that also was sort of complaining about is going to keep happening because it's not realistic to think that like free agency,
the same thing.
Free agency is dead.
I don't want to go to Boston. I don't want to go to Boston. I want to go to LA, right?
Yeah.
Boston
So I mean,
well,
what do you think about that though? Because I guess my feeling just as a fan and as an outside observer is like, if free agency is dead, if we've set the system up this way, of course guys are going to ask out. You can't just expect people to stay where they are all the time when the timelines and the situations are not matching up to their personal expectations.
Right. So this is the unintended consequence of the supermax. This is the unintended consequence. We are leaving you, with a few exceptions, Kawhi, Anthony Davis, we are leaving you no choice but to sign this supermax, right?
Yeah.
No choice. Well, the league has set it up now where if I go to free agency, I can't sign for the 5th year. I can't get the supermax. I'm going to lose tens of millions of dollars. Okay, I'll sign it and just hopefully get traded later. So then why can't you, why, I think, look, I don't like that James Harden and Damian Lillard says, I want to go to one team and one team. I don't like that. I don't think it's good for the league. But what's their choice? What is their choice? The teams are hamstrung. We've talked about this a ton. Like the teams, they've got to operate in what's, in the best judgment of what's best for the franchise. But if there's not a market for players, if there's not a market, like I'm sure there's teams that want Dame and James. I'm not saying that, but you've essentially capped the market to some degree when you say, I just want to go to one, right? Because what happens, Dame's unhappy. What if happens to James? Like it's a shitty situation to be in, but the player essentially has no choice. And I'm not trying to dramatize this. We're like, oh, he's got no choice but to sign for $250 million versus $200 million. No, I'm just saying, like, if you were faced with the same thing at any job, you're going for sure. You're not going to turn down that money. You're not going to turn down.
Also, where I don't have an issue with it. First of all, we can just it's sort of obvious. We can acknowledge, like, these things when they're getting reported out in piecemeal, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation in terms of what is being said and what isn't being said. But I guess where I don't have an issue is, like, James and him, they should both say, like, I want to go here. That's their leverage to say, I want to go here. I think it's up to the teams who control what happens with them. Like look at Kawhi's a good example of this. I don't think Kawhi, could be, remembering wrong. I don't think Kawhi wanted to go to Toronto.
No.
That wasn't, if you would asked him about his personal destination, it wasn't going to be Toronto. But Masai was like, we have a chance to win a championship if we get him. So he went and did it. And I don't think he would regret doing that. And so I think that if there's another team that feels like Dame is going to, put them in that conversation, they should make a swing for it. The idea that, like, everyone else needs to just sort of sit there and not do anything feels a little crazy to me. And it just feels a little like melodramatic to blame the player when the reality is, like, there are two sides to this equation and other people can get involved, and the teams, clearly that's why they're waiting, but I don't know.
So on this, because Sam Howell 32 wrote in, what is your opinion on the Supermax? Want to ask you a question on that. The scenario is we don't have a salary cap, and we operate in sort of the same way that baseball has operated, which is no salary cap, but they implemented the luxury tax, whatever it was, 20 years ago, whatever it is. But we have a luxury tax, right? No salary cap. You pay players whatever you want. I think what happens in that is two things. The amount of money that goes to players is concentrated in the hands of a few. We have a union. We have to look after all 450 people in the union. It's not just about 5 or 10 people. So in some ways, like, LeBron and Steph sacrificed. They do. They sacrifice so that Jordan Poole can get it back.
LeBron would get $800 million on an open market.
In his prime, yeah, for sure. So in some ways that. The other thing that happened, the players' money gets concentrated in the hands of a few. Okay. The best players and the best teams, that becomes just about the richest teams, the owners that are willing to spend. So in that scenario, would you like a league where for, I would say, decades, 4 or 5 teams matter, right? And there's 20 teams that have zero chance year to year. I don't think that's good for the NBA. But maybe it is. Maybe it would be good if the richest teams just dominated the league every single year. Maybe it would be good. What's your opinion?
But what I think would be interesting is, and I think we see this in baseball, is a lot of these biggest spending teams, it doesn't necessarily. So it would be interesting to think about because the sports are very different. So in basketball,
Yeah.
obviously, having super teams is more of a sort of direct correlation to success. But like, look at the Rays, for example. The Rays don't spend any money. The Rays win every year. Look at the Angels. I always bitch about the Angels. The Angels are the most frustrating thing to me in professional sports. The Angels have two of the most transcendent talents in the history of the sport, and they never make the playoffs. Like, they never win a game in the playoffs. And so just because you spend money in those sports, it doesn't necessarily translate to success. And so I think it would just change the dynamic of how these, you would have the Lakers, you would have the Knicks, you would have the, a couple of these other teams that are going and spending crazy, but I don't necessarily think that it would change anything. I like the way the system is now, though, because I basically think that there's it's just more controlled. Baseball feels there's a lot of we can spend a whole pod talking about the difference between the MLB and the NBA, but baseball feels like it's just from like a observant perspective, it's harder to sort of understand the way the like trends of the league are going. And I feel like the NBA, I feel like everything that's happening right now makes sense to me. Like, of course, like the TV deal is about to come up. So of course the cap is going to be raised. I don't know though. I mean, I think that so I guess the question, you've been around all of these organizations. The thing I would ask you is like, who do you think the top 5 spenders would be if this was the case? Is it obviously the Lakers? Is it obviously the biggest markets, or like Phoenix is not one of the biggest markets, but Ishbia is basically like, I will spend every single dollar I have to try to win a championship.
It would be the owners that are willing to spend. Ballmer would be at the top of the list probably. Hey, I want to go back to one thing because I want to explain, because I'm glad you brought this up. Daryl Morey went on Patrick O'Shaughnessy's podcast. I think it was. Anyways, fantastic. It was earlier this year. We said something, and I mentioned this on the podcast before. I think it's mentioned again. The reason that the Angels suck is because their 2 best players get to bat once 9 times. The reason they suck is because their best pitcher gets to pitch once every 5 days. That's the reason they suck, right? That's why baseball, a team like the Rays, a team occasionally like Pittsburgh Pirates randomly will have a good season, whatever. Oakland back in the day with Moneyball. You don't need to spend in baseball to win.
No.
The reason is, and players they figured this out now, right? The owners have figured this out. GMs have figured this out. Players' salaries, unless you're like Fernando Tatis, whatever, Mike Trout, player salaries have gone down. The years have gone down. Like, the baseball players have gotten screwed. But the reason is because in the NBA, the best players have an outsized impact, right?
Yeah.
Daryl Morey used this great analogy. I'll bring it up again. He talks about in baseball, Barry Bonds bats once every 9 times, right? Joel Embiid, if he wants, can use a possession every single time down the floor. And with the way modern offenses work, not only can he use the possession every single time down the floor, he can pick who he wants to guard or who he wants to guard him. It'd be like Barry Bonds getting to bat every single time for the Giants and being able to pick the pitcher that he wants to throw to him. That's the way basketball works versus baseball. So it's 2 different sports. That's why in basketball, if you had the richest owners going and buying the best players over and over, year after year, year after year, guess what? It'd be really hard for the other 20 or 25 teams to have any chance of winning.
But we always talk about this with the super teams. Kevin Durant, Kyrie, James Harden didn't win anything. So it still is, even if those are 3 of objectively the best players in the NBA.
But they're because there's a cap. They can't build out the rest of the roster.
They can't build so that they would just go get players. But do you think
about my free agency in like 19, right? Like, I still had some left in the tank. Obviously, prior to the injury, I think I had a decent amount left in the tank. But in 19, like, my options, if I wanted to go to a contender, which wasn't even really viable, because I wouldn't even describe the Nuggets that summer as a contender, but the Nuggets, for instance, right, could have gone on a 2-year mid-level. Okay. Any team outside of New Orleans, I was looking at the mid-level. Now, in a scenario where Steve Ballmer has a bunch of stars and says, oh, fuck, we need one more shooter. Fuck, let's give JJ 2 years for $45 million. Who cares? It'll help bring us a championship, right? So yes, it's not just about the stars. You'd be able to just get every role player you want for whatever amount of money.
So okay, so all right, so that makes sense. That was
truthfully, think about the cities, right? The cities generally that are willing to spend. Guys want to live in those cities too. So the league would be fucked. This is why we have the salary cap. This is why we have the salary cap. Second thing I wanted to say to all of this, because we keep bringing up the Dame and James thing. I have said this many times. I'll say it again. I think sports fans in general just want to complain, and NBA Twitter just wants to complain. And we act like James Harden and Damian Lillard saying, I want to be traded to this team, hasn't been happening in the NBA or in professional sports for decades. Let's not have amnesia. I'm serious, dude. There's been trade requests forever, and I want to go to this team, right? I want out. It happens all the time, man. It's this not, I refuse to buy that this is some sort of trend unless you're willing to admit that it's been a trend for 25, 30 years. This is not a new thing. I refuse to believe that.
Don't you think the newer thing is, and maybe Daryl's the one that started this with Ben, is the idea of the teams basically hearing these things and then just like letting this drag out? I mean, so like Portland, who knows how long they're going to let this drag out? The season could start and this could be hanging over their head. When in general, I feel like in the past, it would be like you say, I want to get traded. You're traded in the next 2 weeks. They just figure it out. It's like, you just cut bait and move on. And it feels like this idea of these teams dragging these things out more feels newer than the idea of people asking for the trade itself.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, maybe. I always think about in-season trades, right? There's a report comes out in December that somebody's going to get traded. Why does he get traded on Thursday, February 12th at 2:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the deadline, right?
Yeah.
Teams always think if they hold out, they're going to get the best offer at the very end, right? And I think to some degree, bringing a guy into camp, if the trade request is in the offseason, bringing a guy into camp, I think you're playing with fire. We saw that with Harden in Brooklyn. We saw that with Ben in Philly. Like, it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. Basketball requires so much chemistry, cooperation. You build all of that in camp, right? If a player's unhappy for 4 months out of the season, you don't think that has a direct effect on the morale of the team? Of course it does. Of course it does. So you're playing with fire if you don't get it in the offseason. I really believe that. You're playing with absolute fire. Everyone else on that roster now, for the whole season, until something happens, it's hanging over the head. They're getting asked about it. They're seeing reports on Twitter. They're talking about it in the locker room, right? If a player is around the team, he's fucking unhappy. All right, every day I come to work, the star player is unhappy. Guess what? Not only do star players, I talked about this weekend. Not only do star players have an outsized impact on the court, they have an outsized impact off the court, right? Yeah. They help create the work environment by and large. If they wake up unhappy, if they wake up pissed off, chances are a lot of guys at work, a lot of people at work, I should say, a lot of people at work, because it's the staff and sports staff and everybody else, your day is going to suck. That's just the reality. Yeah. Why would you?
It's not, and it's
got to get it done.
And it's not right. And it's not right to anyone. It's not right to I mean, Portland, the specific example, it's not right to a guy like Scoot in his first year to have to deal with that. And Dame's a great guy, and Dame wouldn't want him to deal with that either. It's just this, like, the idea that you have to come in every day and answer questions about is your teammate getting traded or not is not a normal environment for somebody who's trying to sort of figure it out.
OM3 fans, want a quick back-to-school tip? You can cross everything off your list before the big day with DoorDash. Stock up on supplies and lunchtime snacks all in one place.
With DoorDash, you'll enjoy next-level convenience with delivery in the hour, making it easier than ever to get your back-to-school needs fast. All of your favorite retail, grocery, and convenience stores are on the app, so you can shop everything your kids need for back-to-school. Be prepared for the big day arrives. Stock up with on-the-go breakfast, lunchbox staples, and the brands they love.
We've used DoorDash to get some of the kids' lunches delivered ASAP, and it's been massive for the Redick household. Shop DoorDash to get everything you need for the back-to-school season delivered right to your door. Order now for stress-free back-to-school shopping. Use promo code OLDMAN to get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more at convenience, grocery, or retail stores on DoorDash. That's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more. Promo code OLDMAN. Don't forget, that's code OLDMAN for 50% off your next order. Terms apply.
I have a somebody, I'm going to figure out who wrote in about this. A couple people wrote in, but I want to just bring it up just because it's sort of on this point. The Mbappé $1 billion contract. Is this a thing that you foresee on the horizon for the NBA? Do you think that these Saudis are going to get into this? And I think you could think about this answer a little bit. If you were still playing and one of these countries came to you and was like, we are going to drop, $200 million on you to come and be the face of Saudi basketball. You follow everything in the world, everything that's going on. What is your thought process if you get a offer like that?
Yeah, I have no idea if the Saudis are trying to build a competitive basketball league. I have no idea. I don't want to comment on that part.
Okay.
I will say this. We had a discussion, I believe it was a Saturday. I was in the Sabonic member guest and very slow pace of play. Shout out to Sabonic. Wonderful track. Love you guys. Love playing over there. Mike Pascucci has built an amazing golf course. But feel like if I was to give some constructive criticism, constructive feedback, we may have been oversubscribed this weekend with 50 duos. That's 25
somebody's
groups
getting the boot.
And
someone's getting
18
the
holes. I'm just saying,
some poor
on the
suckers
second
getting the
day
boot on this club.
On the second day, the fifth match, we played 5 9-hole matches over 2 days. Our first 4 holes we played in over 2 hours. All right. That's not, to me, an enjoyable round of golf. And I love Sabonic. Great place. Always just a pleasure to play there. They run a great club. Anyways, we're talking about this live golf. We're talking about the Saudis. We're talking about the soccer thing, whatever. My comment is this. There's a lot of countries that have done a lot of bad things. And for us to sit here as U.S. citizens and say our country hasn't done any bad things, and we're going to play moral guardians on a professional athlete's decision to go get a bag because this country did this, right? I think it's a little hypocritical. Now, personally, for me, I'm not taking that money. I wouldn't do it. But each person has to make that decision for themselves. But I am a very broken human being. I just don't like playing the judgment game. I just don't like it. Right?
I think it's fair.
I like the gray. Now, there's some black and white shit with some countries that is very black and white. Okay.
I think the other issue with Mbappe, I talked to a couple of people who know more about this than me about this, is as a guy that's going to be the face of soccer around the globe, it's not a great look for him from a competition standpoint. And so so he hasn't decided whether he's doing it or not. And it's kind of embarrassing. It's a little bit like, it's a little low rent to go play in a league that's 50, notches lower. Even, I know Messi's doing it in the MLS right now, but it's a little different. Where Messi is in his career is different than where Mbappe is. And so, but I think your point about it just being a personal, every case is different about you making that decision. And so it doesn't make sense for you to sit up here and, be judgy on a sort of macro level of everybody deciding, what they want to do.
I think when you looked at the PGA live fracture and you looked at the guys who went to live, by most accounts and by some personal knowledge, the guys who went to live had a lot in common. There was some commonalities amongst their personalities, their competitiveness, all this stuff. The guys that stayed and turned down the money had some commonalities amongst them with their level of competitiveness. I think you nailed it with Mbappe thing is, dude, I can go play, like if I'm if I'm Rory, I'm like, dude, I can go play a casual round of golf whenever I want. I want to play the best on the best tour. I want to, it's my legacy, right? It's my legacy.
Yeah.
And we've seen that now. Like, live golf is a joke, man. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Nobody takes that shit
and it's
seriously.
hard to get that stain off once it's there.
Why do we watch sports? Why do professional athletes, why do they care? It's because you're competing against the best. You're measuring yourself every single night, game, match, whatever. That's why you play. That's why people watch. That's why people care. Why do you think single A baseball, they don't sell out arenas? There's not a TV package for that shit because it's not the best. We want the best. I'm a sports fan. I want the best. Competitive.
All right, let's get more questions.
All right, I got a good one. This is from Wreck-It Ralph 95. Would you rather have Knox be a star at Duke and win the national tournament and never make the NBA, or be a one and done at UNC and be a lottery pick? Whew, tough one. Tough one.
Think very hard about this answer. This is the toughest question.
I think personally it'd be hilarious if either of my kids went to UNC. I'm as a parent, I just want what's best for my kids. So of course I'm going to say, if Knox, he talks all the time. I think any kid is like, I'm going to play in the NBA. I'm going to play in the NBA. You're just like, dude, if that's what his dream is, and if he works hard enough and he decides he wants to go to UNC to pursue that dream, I'm not going to hold him back. I will cut him off, but I'm not going to hold him back.
You know what's funny about UNC? I say this as a objective observer, but people know our relationship. People from UNC, they are still holding on to this with you. I'm sure you see it every day. It's anytime I meet anybody that has any connection to UNC, and the podcast comes up or anything like that, there's still a thing where it's like, oh, I like JJ even though I went to UNC. As if you did something personal to them or something like that, and they're like forgiving you. It's just amazing in 2023 that it is, of all the different things you've done in your life, that maybe Maryland is like this too. I don't know, but it feels like there's a I don't know that it's ever going to go away at this point. I think you might be like 70 and there's still going to be people coming up to you.
The Maryland thing kind of went away just because when they joined the Big Ten, they kind of lost a lot of relevancy. You know what I mean? They lost some relevancy there. So it's like, I think the Maryland fans are like, oh shit. Like, I've literally 3 times this weekend, somebody came up to me and was like, go UNC. It's like, cool, man.
Yeah, great.
Sweet. All right, let's do
I have a
question.
Connor Clark, the concept. If not Seattle or Vegas, what cities would you want to see an NBA team in? I have one.
I want to hear yours first.
Mexico City. I'd rather see a team in Mexico City than, I think it's going to happen in those two. I think Seattle deserves it, so I think it would be awesome to see it in Seattle. But I think it'd be amazing in Mexico City.
I like that call. Mexico City would be great. I think for me, there's actually a lot of really good cities in sort of the mid-tier range. Like Nashville would be a great city to have. Kansas City, great sports town. That'd be sick. Austin would be sick, right? That'd be a great one. They're not even mid-tier. They're like a top 10 city in terms of population.
You couldn't do Austin, though. You have to move one of those teams. You have to move.
But I was actually thinking about this weekend because Tobias was over. And San Diego would be sick. I know you don't want to add another California team, but San Diego, where the Clippers came over originally from the Buffalo Braves, San Diego would be my choice. It's just
I have a question about San Diego. I haven't spent a huge amount of time there, and I don't mean to offend any. I think it's an amazing place every time I've been there. San Diego feels like it's such a nice city, and people are so laid back and chill and stuff that like they don't care about sports as much. I feel like this was the Chargers issue, and the Chargers had a lot of fans. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's like if you have the option of like going to the beach and having like a great day, like just like out on the water or out on the sand or whatever it is, versus like sitting on a message board all day, like refreshing trade rumors. Like it feels like they're not as diehard because of it, and so I think we want a city. I think we want a city that has that. That's what I like about Seattle. That's like a.
Seattle's an obvious choice.
Seattle
right?
would be amazing.
Great fans. No, I think there's two parts to it. Is like you think about the city as a fan base, right? Are they a passionate fan base? What are the extracurricular activities? I think it's one of the reasons, your great point on San Diego, like it's one of the reasons Heat fans are notoriously late to games and don't really cheer to the fourth quarter. Like they've got other things to do. There's a lot going on. Then you have a situation like Oklahoma City, where even when they were not good, like that arena is as loud as it gets. They're selling out almost every game. It becomes such an identity with the city. Where I think I think some of those mid-tier cities, like if you brought a franchise in, you would have that, right? Columbus, Ohio. Just kidding. But the reason I say San Diego is because if I was a player, I'd want to live in San Diego.
It would be awesome. I think Nashville would be great too. And the Nashville fans, their hockey fans are great.
I got one from Cameron Christie. I just watched Interstellar for the first time as a 37-year-old, and wow, a perfect Sunday afternoon. What are the top 5 movies, TV shows you have already watched that you wish you could watch for the first time again? I don't know if I have 5. I know for me, Interstellar would be great to watch again. I wish because I'm getting ready to restart it for the 3rd time. I'm going to rewatch Mad Men again, and I wish I could watch that for the first time.
That's a good one. I haven't watched that in a while. I might watch that in August.
What's one for you?
TV wise, I've seen it a few times, but I feel like my most enjoyable rewatchable experience is probably Breaking Bad because of the stakes and how you get into it. I feel like movie wise, weirdly Goodfellas. It's very different from Interstellar. I've seen it about 75 times, but it's another one which is always on TV. Which we were talking about with Shay offline the other day. Have you watched The Fugitive recently? I love
that's a top 5.
I don't think it's top 5, but I'm just like The Fugitive might be my your version of Interstellar to me, where it's like it's a comfort movie for me. Like every scene in that movie I know, and I feel like when it's on, I can't not watch it. You didn't see Oppenheimer yet, did you? Because a couple people wrote in about that.
Yeah, I have not seen it. The reason being, I have not been in a place that has an IMAX, and so
all right, we're gonna talk. We'll talk about it. I saw it. We're gonna talk about it in September.
Yeah, once I see it, I'll.
I will just say you will not be disappointed. He does not. He has not lost his game.
All right, we got one question for JJ. This is from Paul Andrews. Who is someone you would have loved to play with, and why? I'm going to go with the obvious ones here. LeBron, for sure. Jokic, for sure. Giannis, for sure. Steph, for sure. Those 4. That's probably my
It's
top.
pretty obvious.
Actually,
is there anyone that you're friendly with personality-wise you just wish was a teammate? Just like you feel like it would have been fun to have a year with? Forgetting basketball.
I'm going to bare my soul a little bit here. And I haven't told him this personally, but after we did the Steph interview in November, Jason texted me and he was like, dude, am I wrong? Like, I feel like if you had played with Steph, you guys would be like best friends. It's like a similar comment that Jack Harlow made to me at the white party when he came up and was like, dude, I feel like if we hung out a lot, we'd become best friends. I feel like Steph for me would be the guy.
I think that's fair. I think that's extremely likely.
Some of that, some of that is because I know a bunch of people with Golden State, and obviously this guy's career has been covered, but he's like an incredible teammate, right? An incredible teammate. There's the golf thing, obviously.
Yeah, you have the exact same
favorite tracks. Yeah,
you're like
great.
Very, very, very similar people. Like everything about your lives are very similar. I think it's and also he's an extremely easygoing guy. So your personalities would mesh really well. I think that's a good one. I have a specific basketball one, hybrid, combining a few of these because a bunch of people wrote in about this. But M. Allen writes in, what young players are you expecting to make big leaps this year? Somebody else wrote about young guys we thought might be in the most improved convo. And so there are a few young people that feel like should focus on.
I think the first two guys that come to mind are Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. And again, I don't really care about the most improved player because I think it's the weirdest award, and especially how people vote on it. But I think those two guys could potentially make Cleveland a real deal contender and not just, as Brian Windhorst says, a spreadsheet contender. Garland, to me, coming off his All-Star season and then having to play with Donovan, right? Different fit, a little bit different mix. He kind of had an underrated awesome season to me where, you know, he was in the conversation for an All-Star, in the conversation for third-team All-NBA. I just thought he was awesome. And to figure out how to play alongside Donovan so seamlessly. We had Kobe Altman on during the Summer League broadcast, and that's what he talked about. He's like, the fit was like seamless. Garland is still so young. Mobley is still so young. I don't know. Again, we talked earlier in the show about pre-agency and the extension stuff with Donovan Mitchell. That's going to be a big storyline coming up. But dude, Cleveland has a chance, like with what they did in free agency, and if Garland and Mobley, even if on the margins they improve. The thing with Mobley, and I'll say this, the thing with Mobley, because Mark Jones and I talked about this during the broadcast. Mark said, you know, the trend is, to me, the league is going back to two bigs and getting bigger. I don't agree with that. I think a lot of what makes two bigs work is if one of those bigs can space the floor, right? Giannis and Lopez. You know, I think the two big situation has worked in Golden State because you have the two greatest shooters of all time, like next to each other. So it works. So every team is a little different. If Evan Mobley, fuck the isolation shit, fuck the post ups and all that. If he just becomes a 35+% shooter on that team and everything else stays the same, bro.
We talked about that with Legler. He's like, I think when we talked about it with him, he was at 28% or something like that from three. It's like if he's even like 33 or 34, it's like everything gets unlocked.
The other guy I wanted to mention who I think will be interesting. Actually, I'll say two guys. We've talked about Maxey a bunch, but you know, depending on what happens with this James situation, so far no extension. If James does get traded, I'm buying all the Tyrese Maxey stock right now. I think Maxey's awesome. I think he has a chance to be really fucking good. I'm excited about him. The other guy is Patrick Williams, who I don't know if he ends up signing an extension or not, but he's going into his fourth year. And low key, like, got better. Like, low key, I think he was in the top 2 in terms of guarding isolations last year in terms of field goal percentage. He shot over 40% on catch and shoot threes. I hate summer workout tapes, but some Patrick Williams thing came across my timeline a couple of days ago, and his handle looked fucking tight. Like, that to me is what made Kawhi. People talk about his defense and his mid-range and all shit. No, Kawhi became a monster because he all of a sudden developed a top 10 handle, like fucking unbreakable handle. And if Patrick Williams proves the handle, keeps improving his shot, like he's got the physique, body, all that stuff. If he doesn't sign the extension, he's going into restricted free agency contract year. I'm excited about Patrick Williams. I'm excited about him.
I got two more. I got two more for you.
All right.
Franz Wagner.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about him, but it's like, I think that it feels like is a, his jump last year was crazy, and I feel like it could be bigger. And then our boy Trey Murphy, I think, is another one who, I mean, we'll see what happens with that team overall, but at his, he went to 41% from three, 10 points a game jump.
I like the Trey Murphy call, by the way. And that's just not because we had him on the show and he gave me shit for an hour and 15 minutes, and I loved it. I looking at this, it's like think we're kind of sticking when we say young guys. I still want to stick with guys on their rookie deals. I saw a graphic of some people from like the highest scores and true shooting percentage from the 2021 draft. And Trey's true shooting percentage was ridiculous. Obviously not the volume of points, but Trey's a great call. I'm also, God, I hate bringing up the Rockets again. I'm oddly excited to see what Jalen Green does this year.
They have a lot of interesting. There's a lot of interesting shit with that team,
dude. I mean, Şengün, of course, but like, I'm excited to see what Jalen Green does this year.
Well, and then Thompson is like, I mean, both of them are going to be fascinating to watch. And it's
I got one more for. Actually, I'm just looking through the 2021 draft. I got one more for you. Let's assume Knicks don't make a trade, right?
Yeah.
The guy that could potentially give them another 5 wins in the regular season and really, really help them in the playoffs. I think as much as people talk about Quickly's awesome. Quentin Grimes.
Yeah, it was
some
great.
Improvement offensively, some improvement with consistency shooting the basketball. He's highly competitive, highly energetic. He fits on that team. He fits on that roster. Quentin Grimes is another one. There you go, Knicks fans. There's some positivity.
I got another one. I gotta figure out who asked this because I was thinking about it. I'll pull the name up. But basically your favorite NBA what ifs. And the example they used was like CP to the Lakers, but there's a lot of them. Oh, here we go. Josh Rivera. Biggest what if in NBA history.
Biggest what if in NBA history? I mean, I think the obvious one is like, what if Portland had drafted Michael Jordan? It's the obvious one, right?
That's the obvious. Can I bring
MJ and Clyde Drexler on the wing?
Can I bring up a recent what if we've talked about? I don't know if we talked about it on the show, which is not. I'm not going to say it's Portland Jordan yet, but what if Phoenix had drafted Luka? Like, look at that backcourt.
Yeah, you know what? We don't talk about that enough because we always give shit to the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
And Ayton, look, I get the Ayton pick. I do. But yeah, you're right. That's a good one. The other one, I brought up Jordan. The other one that, because he's got GOAT status as well, is like the Bucks. And who knows? I still haven't read something super credible, but who knows if the Bucks had been like, hey, we'll take Curry instead of Monte Ellis. That's the other one. And with that team too, what if Kerr takes the Knicks job? And it's, I don't know, Stan Van Gundy. I don't know if they ever offered him the position, but I know he wanted personnel. That's a what if. That's a big what if. What if they traded Klay Thompson for Kevin Love after 2014? There's another big what if. Ooh,
the Knicks. I went to that Steph doc screening the other day, and all the Knicks fans there, like, it's not really a what if because they didn't have a chance to pick him. Obviously, he went to pick before them. But it's like that's their thing of like, because they all knew at the time. I think all the fans at the time wanted him, and then the second he started cooking, it just became like it just made it worse and worse.
I think so. Oh, here's another one: Kevin Durant to the Trailblazers. I think most of the what ifs come down to like the draft and a team not picking like a top 10 or 15 player of all time, right? I think that probably is the biggest what ifs. The other what ifs are like injury what ifs. Greg Oden, Derrick Rose, guys like that. Like those are probably the other what ifs. But some of the funny what ifs are the trade stuff because it's like we could have done this deal and we didn't. And I mean, I'll give you another recent one. By the way, I'm not like I like James Harden. I love James Harden as a player. Like I don't have anything negative towards him. James wants to play a certain way. I think he's a basketball savant. But what if instead of dragging the Ben Simmons thing out the whole season, they traded Ben Simmons to Sacramento for Tyrese Halliburton and Harrison Barnes? There's a what if. I think
I feel bad for our Philly fan friends at a certain point because they have a lot of recent. I mean, the McHale one's another one that they get pissed about. Like they have a lot of recent ones that are like, maybe these aren't Jordan to Portland, but you're like, if you had just done these, the obvious one involves you and Jimmy. Like if you had just done these things, like you had the team, whether or not the process is quote unquote dead or not, you had the pieces to have a dynasty. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And it's almost more frustrating to have that than it just didn't work out. Like the guys weren't good enough. It's like they were good enough and the pieces were there. They had that with Tatum. I mean, the Tatum one's harder to blame them for because, you know, I think everybody thought Markelle was going to be great. And also it's not clear they were going to pick him. But when you just like, I want to read a book, or I know there's been a few things written about it. I want to read something about that 4-year stretch, you know, 5 years later, because I feel like it's a fascinating NBA case study of all the different things they could have done.
Yeah, for sure. And look, again, going back to the what if thing on the draft, hardest thing in the NBA to get right. It really is. And no one, even the Sam Presties of the world, the Zach Klymans of the world, no one has 1,000% batting average, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if you're lucky over a 10-year stretch, you get 6 right, or you get 7 right if you're really lucky. No one's going to bat 1,000. Like, you're just not. But if you look at the teams that are just shitty all the time, there's really two trends you see. Number one, they drafted poorly. You can look at who they picked, and you can look at 5 guys that were picked relatively close to that player that are all-star, all-NBA, and this guy lasted 4 years, right? Or in the case of the Knicks, they keep being 1 pick away from the guy, right? They keep the Knicks. Think about the Knicks in 2019. They get,
I know,
love RJ, but they get RJ instead of Ja or Zion. And obviously, not that those guys have a flawless resume at this point, but I'm talking about talent here, right?
Yeah,
talking about talent. And
just
so,
luck.
Just like luck, right? It's luck.
Yeah. Here's a golf one. Timmy McDonald, living or dead, dream golf group. First question. Second question, if you could have one golf skill like Space Jam, what is it? And third question, shout out Shay, what's the best golf movie? Okay, you do the golf group. I have the movie.
Okay. What's your favorite golf movie?
I mean, there's a lot, actually. I shouldn't say that I have it definitively. My personal favorite is Happy Gilmore, but I feel like there's a lot of options. I don't think that it's universally considered to be the best golf movie, but that's another one for me that I just watched it a couple weeks ago. Like I'll watch that every 6 months and it never gets old.
I mean, you go through them. You got Tin Cup, you got The Greatest Game Ever Played, The Legend of Bagger Vance, Happy Gilmore,
Caddyshack.
Those are the one.
Caddyshack's in the conversation for sure. Happy Gilmore is just more like my generation, I feel like.
Dude, this is a strong hot take. I'm curious to get Jason's thought on this as well. I think Caddyshack is so overrated. I think it's overrated. Like,
I think it's just an older movie.
No,
it's just for like an older crowd.
One of the actors in that movie I don't find funny at all, and he's supposed to be the comedic guy. Okay,
who's that?
Rodney Dangerfield. He's not funny. There's nothing about his humor that is funny.
That's a hotter take than blaming the movie.
Like that.
I mean, I'm not going to.
He was never funny in any role to me. So like, that's one thing. Of Bill Murray's roles in movies, I've got his role in Caddyshack to me is in the bottom, 10% of favorite roles he's ever had. Loved Chevy Chase's character, but overall the movie, I don't like the movie. I'm going to say Happy Gilmore as well of those movies. It's my favorite.
Right, what's the
foursome? Man, for sure Tiger Woods. Putting him in there. For sure Steph. I'll put him in there. And for sure MJ. That's easy. Get to see the greatest golfer of all time, the greatest basketball player of all time to some people, and the greatest shooter of all time. And MJ is going to get the action going. Heavy action.
How do you think that group would vibe? I tell you, like Tiger and MJ would vibe. I very competitive.
Yeah.
A lot of alpha.
It'd be awesome, bro.
There's a lot of alpha.
It'd be awesome.
Group. You need some comic relief.
I'd be getting, first of all, I don't know what Tiger's, if he has to play in a group like that, I don't know what his handicap is, but I'd probably be stroking every hole. And we're playing at Cypress. Dream Golf Foursome. There it is. Playing at Cypress.
I like it. We have to answer one of these questions about the Pistons because we had like 95 questions about the Pistons.
All right.
I'll find a specific one. But okay, let's just talk about the Pistons. What do you think the Pistons have to do? They were 28th in offense, 27th in defense. There's 17 wins. There was not a lot last year to be thrilled about. What do you think they have to do besides be healthy to improve?
We were talking about young players earlier, and I really like a lot of the young players on the Pistons. So I'm going to talk about the players that I like in a positive way. And I'll start with Cade because it's not just about him being healthy. It's about him being an all NBA level player, whether that's this year or next year or 2 years from now. Everything with the Pistons rides on that. Okay. Clearly a talented guy. Haven't seen that consistently, but everything starts and ends with is Cade Cunningham an all NBA player? Now, if he is, and Jaden Ivey improves on the margins, Jalen Duren improves on the margins. Talked about Asar Thompson. Love him. If he is impact ready in 2 or 3 years and is a 35% shooter or better from three, okay. Now you've got a chance to be a good team, especially as some of the teams in the East either age out or you get star players asking for trades. So I think the future's bright. They brought in Monty Williams, great coach. I like what's going on in Detroit. But
what do you think? You've played with Monty.
With the caveat, Cade Cunningham has to be an all NBA, all-star level player.
Yeah, you've played with Monty. What do you feel like? And everyone loves him. Like, what do you feel like he does so well that could be helpful for like a young team like this?
I think to some degree, the young team thing is perfect for him. I've asked him a lot about just like his improvement, from New Orleans to Phoenix. And I think he has talked about letting go a little bit and like allowing players to have more input, allowing players to be creative and do more things on the fly. But as a basketball mind and as a communicator, I think Monty Williams is top notch. And the way he genuinely cares about you as a human being, I think is perfect for a young team. I think it's a great fit. I'm hyped. I'm like I'd say I'm moderately level hyped about.
They're good. That's
Detroit,
a really good league.
That's what I'm saying. Like
league pass team. Them and Houston
the other day.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to watch a lot of Detroit games this year.
All right, Jackson Jeffries. Are there any sleeper teams that have not been in the news this summer that you could see making major moves the public would not expect, or just a team that could get over the hump that people aren't talking about?
Major moves. I don't like to. I don't. I mean, I have
the
some
moves. Yeah, who knows?
I have no idea. I'll go back. I mean, I go back to the Cavs on that. I think potentially them. I thought the interesting thing with Sacramento was they had all this cap space and then they didn't use it. And Wendy talked about that. Like, could they not have used it because nobody was going to come? And then they pivot and, did they create it just so they could get Sabonis back and just so they can re-sign Harrison Barnes prior to them hitting free agency? Like, I don't know all that stuff. But they're a team I'm going to watch this year. I mean, I watched them a ton last year, but like they're another team because I'm excited for more De'Aaron Fox. I'm excited for more Sabonis. Keegan Murray improves just on the margins a little bit. Like he doesn't even have to take a leap, but he improves on the margins a little bit. Yeah, they're gonna be an interesting team in the West.
I got one for you in the East. Atlanta.
Oh man,
I feel like
I thought you were gonna say the Bulls again. I thought you were gonna say the
I don't know
Bulls.
what is going on with the Bulls. I think Atlanta is, going to attempt to make a trade, whether it's for Siakam or somebody like that. They're going to try to do it, and I think if they do it, since that run, I feel like everybody has just been down in the dumps on them. I mean, I thought they put together like a fine showing against Boston in the playoffs. I don't think last year was like a disaster for them. And I think if you add a piece like a Siakam to that core, I'm like, I don't know that, that team's not necessarily coming out of the East, but there's a lot. I also just like love Okongwu. So I don't know if he would be a part of that trade or not, but like if he's a guy that's like, like young guys that are going to keep getting better, I feel like
Okongwu a lot. Yeah.
Him with Trey and Murray is going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I have nothing negative to say to that comment. I like it. Let's do one more real quick. All right. Actually, we'll do this one. This is from Let's Go Wolves. What is the most underrated logistical factor that contributes to making a game more difficult? I.e., long flight, late night arrival, afternoon tip-off, etc. I think there's two things. The travel's the obvious one. But it's not just the travel, right? It's, everybody actually showing up to the airport on time when you're leaving your home city. Time is of the essence, especially on a back-to-back. There's, I would say, 5 to 10 times a year, easy, there's some sort of mechanical issue. You guys know this. We travel during the winter. We always have to de-ice the plane. That's an issue. You then have to load the bus, which, we don't take our luggage with us. That comes on a truck. But you have to load the bus. Some places like Denver or Washington, because we have to fly into Dulles and Washington, they're so far away from the hotel. That's more added time. Then, if you're not on a back-to-back, generally you wait for your bag. Sometimes if you are on a back-to-back, you still wait for your bag. So once they unload the trucks, maybe you wait downstairs. Maybe you wait for one of the rookies to take it up to you. That's more time. So it's not just like getting on a plane and getting off a plane. It's literally, 10, 15 minutes here and there, and all of a sudden it's a back-to-back and you're going to bed at 4 a.m. Or you've just played a back-to-back. You're in the new city. You're going to bed at 3. You've got a day off in the game the next day. Like, you extrapolate that over 6-7 months, and you're running on fumes some weeks. You're running on fumes. The road is very difficult. Getting home for a week, let's just call it a week, where you have 3 games in a week or 4 games in a week. As much as the games are hard, that period of time is like a reset. That is the best part for me. So that's the travel part is the obvious one. My second underrated logistical factor. Everybody's heard this story that has listened to the podcast. My worst shooting game of my career was in Indiana when I played for the Bucks. And granted, I was really struggling for the Bucks, especially like last probably 3 weeks of the regular season. But we were in Indiana. We were staying at a different hotel, not the Conrad where everybody always stays. And my room service doesn't show up. I would call. I was a routine guy. So when it was time to take my nap, I'd call downstairs to room service. And if the bus was at 5, I would say, "Can you please deliver my chicken, rice, broccoli at 4:30 p.m.?" If it was at 5:30, I'd say, "Can you please deliver my chicken, rice, and broccoli and a small cup or a small pot of black coffee at 5 p.m.?" Right? Food doesn't show up. I go, my brain goes ballistic, and I shoot like 1 for 11 or something. And it was the worst shooting game of my career, whatever I ended up shooting. But I say all that because I think an underrated factor is game time. Game time. That is an underrated factor.
The time of the game.
You're in Central Time, and you've got the second national televised game on ESPN. and you're playing at 9 p.m. local time. You're playing in the fourth quarter at 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
Like, think
wasn't this
about
a big
that.
wasn't this a big thing in the bubble? Because it was the games were all over. It was like games were at like 3 p.m. and shit for the.
Yeah, well,
for
I
the,
mean,
everything was thrown off.
I
but-
got used to playing when I was in LA. I got used to playing the 1 p.m. game because we were the third tenant in the Staples Center or whatever it's called now. And you just get used to, you get a new routine for game time. So going back 9 p.m. that sucks, right? 1 p.m., 12 p.m. I got used to, fine, right? The tricky ones were like the 3:30 tip-offs, especially if the team wanted to meet. Because then you're like, I kind of can't fit in my hour and a half, 2-hour nap, right? You maybe you eat one big meal and a light meal. Maybe you do get up early and eat. So those were the tricky ones. That like 3:30, 4 o'clock, like playoff Christmas Day, 5 o'clock. I hated that. As long as it was over like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., I'm good. 1 p.m., 2 p.m., I'm good. Is that tricky middle afternoon slot?
I have a follow-up to that. And I'm not saying you partook in this, but what about the schedule losses when you have a noon game in Miami or Houston or LA, or weirdly DC is low-key, I think, a problem for that too. If I were to put a city that was like you would have issues on a Sunday morning game, I think DC would be in the conversation as well.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, you went to school there. You went to school in DC, so I get what
DC has it. DC, the
schedule losses like Denver on the second with a home game, and the other team has the second night of a back-to-back. Chalk it up. That's an L, right? Something like a 95% win percentage or something like that.
Why Denver?
Why Denver?
Yeah.
Because altitude, yeah, but it's more we would have games like we'd play like Portland or in LA, then you've got to fly 2.5 hours east, so you're losing time, and then you've got a 45-minute commute from the airport. You're literally getting into your hotel room, not falling asleep at 5 a.m.
Okay.
That's an L. I'm sorry, that's an L.
Okay.
You get the text as soon as you get to the hotel. We're meeting at the arena at 45 on the clock. Or 40 on the clock. So now your pregame schedule is all changed. You don't have your normal meeting in the morning. That's an L, right? The other one I would say, like the obvious ones, like, I went to a bunch of MSG games and you did too. And like we knew which players had been out and which teams had been there 4 days. So the schedule lost when like you're in New York or Miami or LA or wherever for 4 fucking days. And like you play the two games, but you're like, I went out 3 of the nights, and you're just like,
There was one game this year. It was like January 2nd or something like that. It was the Suns, and it was the who knows whatever. It was over New Year's Eve. They were there for like 4 days, and the Knicks won. It was like 9. It was like they won like 100-60 or something like that.
Yeah, Phoenix scored like 11 points in the first.
You're
quarter.
like at the game, and you're just like.
I was actually kind of mad that I bought tickets for that game because that game was pretty brutal. So that's one. And then the last one is the NBA randomly would do this is like you're an East Coast team and you go to the West Coast and you play 5 games in 5 cities in 9 days. And then on the way back to market, you stop in Indiana. And you're just like, dude, I just want to be fucking home. I don't want to be in Indiana right now. Nothing against Indiana. I just want to be home, right? We're just on the West Coast. It's like, why are you doing this? Or like, we would do this. There was one, I can't remember what it was in LA. I think it was, we went east. We had like our last one in Milwaukee or something. And then we like randomly had a game in San Francisco in Oakland against Golden State. And we're like, what the fuck, dude? I also hated, the other one I hate is when you would go on a West Coast trip or an East Coast trip. Because Central, it's a different travel schedule. You don't do these long trips. East Coast team, West Coast team, you do these long trips. You go out, you come back, you play one home game, and then you go play a nationally televised game on the road. And it's like
that's crazy.
Why would you schedule it this way? All right, it's time for the last question, the Rowback question. As you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the brand. Love these performance hoodies. Wear them every day. Walking the dog, working out, playing golf. Chilling at the house. These are my go-tos. They've got great polos, great stuff at Rowback. Rowback.com, our listeners get 20% off your first order using code OLD. That's RHOBACK.com. Use code OLD. You get 20% off your first purchase. Today's Rowback question is, what is the best piece of life advice you've ever received? And it's a very simple one. For me, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Tommy, but for me, my dad growing up, as I was developing as a adolescent young man, when I would go over the top a little bit in my reaction to things as I'm learning about life and basketball and relationships and all this, gave me a very simple piece of advice. He said, JJ, it's not always about you. And I have taken that to heart. And that piece of advice served me incredibly well as a member of a team sport. And it served me incredibly well as the member of a 4-person family, now 5, kind of with Georgie, our dog. You know, it's not always about you. What about for you?
That's a really good piece of advice. I got mine is from both my parents, and it's just, there's always another day. And I think I think that it's, this was when I was like younger and I was in a bad mood about something. And I would just be like, you know what? Sleep it off. Don't wake up. Don't go to sleep angry. Don't wake up angry. There's always another day. And generally that has worked out. I like yours though. That's a good one to pass on to the kids, because I think that's applicable in basically every situation.
Bro, I'm telling you, anytime, even as a 39-year-old now, when I get worked up about something, and I'm not worked up, I don't carry around anger and like manifest that in real life. But when I get worked up internally, I'm a self-talker. I'm an internal talker. When I'm having my inner dialogue and I'm getting worked up, that piece of advice allows me to separate a little bit and assess the situation at 30,000 feet. Whereas if I'm just all consumed with my own sort of victimization and why I've been wronged or why someone has said something or done something that has pissed me off, it separates the ego a little bit when you use that, right? And it also creates a little bit of empathy. You think about that a lot. It's not always about it's always about you. It creates a little bit of empathy.
I think it's one of the many reasons that team sports in general, no matter what the sport is, are good. Because you learn that quick, no matter how good you are, you have to deal with that. You have to deal with that, and you also have to build resilience, because you're always going to lose.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's known you now for 7 years, I can say that your parents' piece of advice has served you well, and you generally almost always have a sunny disposition, and you recognize that the here and now is maybe not as important as the tomorrow. I love it. All right, this has been the Rowback question. Go to rowback.com, get 20% off your first purchase using code OLD. Guys, we appreciate you. Just a reminder, Tommy and I will be taking a break. Jason also needs a break. Kylie needs a break. Nicole, everybody needs a break. So we will be taking a break in August. This will be our last episode for a few weeks, but we will be back. Old Men and the Three Things will have one more episode on Monday. As always, we appreciate you guys. Lots of fun stuff coming. Thank you.